Welcome to Talking Feds, a roundtable that brings together prominent former federal officials and special guests for a dynamic discussion of the most important political and legal topics of the day. I'm Harry Littman. It was a week in which the pace and the intensity of Trump's authoritarian agenda spiked. Trump moved to arm National Guard members in the district and called on additional troops from other states to join the occupation, which he signaled he wants to extend indefinitely. For their part, D.C. residents found themselves adjusting to a city swarming with law enforcement in its most prominent and popular public spaces. And Trump carried out another mission in his reprisal campaign when FBI agents executed search warrants at the home and office of his former national security advisor turned harsh critic, John Bolton. The high-profile operation will lead at the very least to embarrassment and major legal expenses for Bolton, but it remained to be seen whether the action was supported by any real wrongdoing on Bolton's part. Elsewhere, California's tit-for-tat response to a Texas gerrymander signaled a new resolve from at least some nationally prominent Democrats to fight fire with fire, including a sharp new vitriolic tone to match the nasty snipes that Trump and Republicans have been launching for years. To try to understand the federal takeover of the nation's capital, the accelerating gerrymandering arms race, and the ruthless pursuit of Trump's enemies, I'm really pleased to welcome three of the most knowledgeable commentators in the country, Talking Fed stalwarts all. And they are Jason Kander, the president of National Expansion at Veterans Community Project. After serving in the Army in Afghanistan, Jason was elected to the Missouri State Legislature and later became Missouri Secretary of State in 2012. Jason hosts the excellent podcast Majority 54. Jason, thank you for your service, and thanks for returning, as always, to Talking Feds.
Always good to be here.
Norm Ornstein. I don't think you require any introduction at this point, but what the heck? A political scientist, contributing editor for The Atlantic magazine, co-host of the excellent podcast Words Matter, also a prolific author, including co-writing the great book One Nation After Trump, and really considered the foremost authority on the U.S. Congress. Norm Ornstein, thanks as always for joining.
Thank you, Harry. It's always a pleasure.
Tara Setmayer is the co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. Also, she is a regular contributor to MSNBC. Formerly, Tara was a Republican communications director on Capitol Hill, and she is a resident scholar at the UVA Center for Politics. Tara Setmayer, thanks so much for rejoining this crazy week.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
All right. Let's start in the District of Columbia. As we speak, we have an unprecedented and growing in size and perhaps time federal presence, with National Guard troops deploying from across the country to address not riots, not a rebellion, but a sort of standard urban crime situation. So let's start on the ground. And Tara, can I start with you? Because you live in the general area, right? What are you actually seeing? We have these very harrowing videos. Are they cherry-picked, or is the nation's capital under occupation?
I have to tell you, Harry, as someone who's lived in the D.C. area for over 30 years, I went to college here. I went to George Washington University. My husband and I have lived here for many decades, and I take the train often. We live in the suburbs now in Virginia, but I take the train often from Union Station to New York for appearances on cable news and business in New York. My Seneca Project co-founder lives in New York City. And I, over the last week and a half, since Donald Trump has decided to militarize D.C., have taken some video and looked around Union Station to see, what is this for real? What are we doing here? And I have to tell you, it was so disturbing getting off the train this week and seeing National Guardsmen posted out front of Union Station with the U.S. Capitol in the background, and families who are in D.C. to visit, or, maybe they work there, having to navigate through federal law enforcement agents and the National freaking Guard in our nation's capital. It is completely unnecessary.
This was in Union Station?
Union Station. Yes, where, I mean, listen, is there a homeless problem in D.C.? Yes. Is there crime in D.C.? Sure, just like any other city. Is D.C. the most violent city in the country that requires a federal takeover and a militarization of the police department? No. As a matter of fact, there are 17 other cities in this country that have more violent crime than Washington, D.C., including majority red states: Memphis, St. Louis, Louisiana. In Louisiana, they have 4 cities that have more violent crime rate, violent crime rates than Washington, D.C. But Donald Trump isn't trying to militarize those places because he's trying to set an example in D.C. The people of Washington, D.C. are being terrorized. Literally, we're all seeing the raw video. They're not patrolling in the high crime areas of Washington. They're not in the Southeast Ward 8. Donald Trump was in Ward 8 at the Department of Homeland Security facility, okay, which is fenced in. It's a federal facility. That's not the part of Ward 8 in Southeast D.C. where there's crime, or in Northeast D.C. This is all for show. It's part of his authoritarian wet dream that he has had for years. And what he's doing should send shivers down the spine of everyone. Just on Friday, he was in an unhinged rant in the Oval Office threatening the mayor of D.C., a black woman, by the way, that she doesn't get her act together, she's going to be ousted. What does that mean? She's a duly elected mayor of Washington, D.C. He said that he could just call a national emergency and keep the troops there as long as he wants if he feels there's a national emergency. This is unhinged authoritarian garbage that has no place in the United States of America. It is unwarranted in D.C. Donald Trump is looking to scale this up. They've now armed the National Guard. I mean, it's unspeakable. It breaks my heart. I'm angry about it. And I just don't understand why there aren't more people screaming from the rooftops about how unseemly and dangerous this is. If Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, name your Democrat, had done a fraction of these things or threatened this type of imperialist takeover of any American city, there would be hell to pay. And I'm not feeling that from the people in power who should be speaking up about it.
Wow. So I think we all agree with every word, but this is the eyewitness account of, it's not a picture here and a picture there. The friggin' capital of the United States of America is occupied, and not in a way to sort of temporarily quell a problem. By the way, the whole premise was a total tawdry Trumpian lie.
Correct.
That's a triple T. But in fact, the violent crime situation in D.C. is at its lowest in 30 years and falling still. But it just didn't keep him from just spouting it.
And lying about it, Harry.
And lying.
Just lying. That's the other thing, too.
That's the word. You got to call it out.
It is. He's just bullshit lying. Like he said, he did one of his BS sir stories, which we all know that's a tell. Anytime there's a sir involved, we know he made it up. I mean, he literally lied the day after a Washington Post story came out about how reservations in restaurants and attendance at bars has plummeted since the takeover. And which is true because people are terrorized here.
Yeah.
They don't want to go out. And so he went and lied from the Oval Office, lied in front of the podium or wherever he was again about how, his friend went out 4 nights in a row and people are calling him and thanking him because they can safely go out to dinner now. And that's a lie. It's a direct lie to contrast the truth about what's actually happening and the fact that restaurants and bars patronage is plummeting because people don't want to go there. So, I mean, but the pushback isn't there. He's lying about the amount of crime. He's just lying about it. And people are just like, oh, okay.
And certainly legally, the idea of it being perpetual. Are you gentlemen in the heartlands wisely in Missouri and Minnesota?
No, I'm in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Norm is here too.
Well, Norm, give us your thoughts then. How's it feeling to you?
Well, I've been here longer than Tara. That's because I'm older than Tara. And I'm old enough to remember when Jason Kander was an intern in my office.
That's right.
But having said that, I would add a couple of things to what Tara said. I'm in the middle of the city and we don't see much of anything. And it's clear it's performative, but it's more than that, Tara. And I'm not sure this guy's had a wet dream in the last 40 years. But that aside,
Oh, I was going to use that as the title for the episode,
Yeah.
Authoritarian Wet Dream.
I think you can now.
yeah,
Okay. Authoritarian Wet Dream, question mark?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Norm.
this is a beta test.
Yes.
It's not just a gesture. He's already said today that Chicago is next.
Mhm.
He has no authority to pull National Guard troops in. The irony, of course, as Tara mentioned, but to take it further, we have National Guard troops from Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi has a crime rate many times higher than that of Washington. Why they're not keeping their troops for their own crime problems, we know the obvious answer to this. But it's a beta test for a military takeover, not just of blue cities, but watch out for what happens with elections
Yes.
or as his standing plummets even more.
Absolutely.
And that this guy would lie about not just those things, but say he can stay indefinitely when the law says he's got 30 days and then it has to be approved by Congress. Not that I would give the Democrats in the Senate any slack for much of anything these days, but that would not get through. But we also know, based on a couple of Supreme Court rulings this past week, and one in particular, where the court basically allowed Trump to negate huge numbers of NIH grants on the flimsiest cause, violating what the lower court said was the Administrative Practices Act. And we know in this, the most brilliant dissent I've seen in a very long time from Ketanji Brown Jackson, who not only brilliantly referenced Calvin and Hobbes and Calvin Ball, saying Calvin Ball is where there are no rules, but we make up the rules as we go along, and that there are only two rules with this majority. One is we make up the rules. The second is we do whatever the president wants. So whether he can get away with lawless behavior, even if courageous judges below the Supreme Court level try to block him, remains to be seen, but I'm not optimistic, and this is truly chilling. Let's add also that you've got National Guard troops who know nothing about policing.
Correct.
Jason is going to address this, I think, in much more detail. They're giving them weapons. They are bringing in these huge military vehicles that have no purpose on the streets of D.C. Trump said, well, we haven't had a murder in the last week. That's historic. We had many weeks before that without murders. I'm convinced that there will be murders coming, and they're going to be murders because some of these ICE thugs are going to murder somebody.
Yes.
Or we're going to have some National Guards person panicked over something happening, probably over a protest, who might shoot somebody. Or one of these huge vehicles. We already had an accident where somebody was trapped inside the car. They had to bring out the jaws to get that person out, who thankfully wasn't harmed. Somebody's going to get crushed in a car.
Or worse, and just before Jason talks about the military part of this, assuming that's where he wants to go, given his background.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw the video of the moped delivery driver that was tased and brutally taken down by like 5 or 6 masked, unidentifiable, quote, agents. I guess they were federal agents. I don't know, because they're not identifying themselves, which is outrageous. We've already had reports of people impersonating federal agents and kidnapping women and doing God knows what because they refuse to identify themselves. And citizen activists and just regular citizens, God bless them, with their phones are recording a lot of these interactions, and just the horrific nature of them, again, should send shivers down everyone's spine, because that could be you at any point. They seem to be indiscriminate with it. More likely someone who looks like me as opposed to someone who looks like Norm or Jason, unfortunately, but that's the purpose. And there was a video of this on 14th Street, 14th and I believe like R, which is
14th
an area.
and R, right by La Diplomat.
Right by La Dip, right?
Popular restaurants.
Yeah, it's a popular area where a lot of political, folks go and people on the Hill go. And they've cleaned up 14th Street remarkably over the years. It's a great place now. Anyway, the guys recording it were trying to get the agents to identify themselves. They wouldn't. They were arrogant asses, like a lot of them have been. And again, people who know me and follow me know I come from a law enforcement family, and my husband is an active federal agent right now. I will not name where, to protect him. But so he's horrified by this as well, given his 25 plus years of training and experience in this, watching what's going on. But one of the guys said to the agent, you're ruining this country. And the agent said, liberals have already done that. That is the whole thing right there. It is telling you that this is politically motivated, that a lot of these guys have been, that have a bias, are empowered now with their badge and gun to take it out on the, quote, liberals. In any other circumstance, any other time, that would be a fireable offense. Fireable. Or they would be brought under charges of violation of civil rights under color of law. And yet, these guys are out here, carte blanche, violating people's civil rights every freaking day with the blessing of the federal government.
Yeah. As far as the military side of this, like, I think that there's a couple of fundamental differences that we should highlight between the federal law enforcement folks that are in D.C. right now and the military folks, the National Guard folks. One, I would venture to guess that the federal law enforcement folks, DEA, FBI, all these folks who find themselves doing presence patrols in D.C., which is totally ridiculous. And by the way, like, they're as untrained for presence patrols as the Army National Guard is for civilian law enforcement. But I would venture a guess that most of the folks doing that have volunteered from within the ranks. To your point, Tara, the size of federal law enforcement in this country is large enough, and D.C. is small enough, that when you're asking people who usually do very different work, and this sort of work is really pretty far below their pay grade to do this, you're going to get the people you're describing, Tara, because you're going to get the people who are eager to do this, to make a point and to be a part of the political side of this, which is really scary. And then on the other hand, with the National Guard folks, it doesn't work that way. So if I were an E4 specialist or an E5 sergeant from the West Virginia Army National Guard, and, you know, I've probably got kids under 10 and a job that, yes, I am, you know, supposed to be, but let's be honest, in most of these jobs, it's very hard to enforce this. I'm supposed to be protected from losing my civilian job when I'm mobilized. Well, you know, you're going to send me to do something that I know is stupid and that I know is, like, you're literally deploying me, and my mission is keep the press from talking about Epstein.
Right.
Like, and I would be so mad about that. And so that's the military side of this. I will say, to give Governor Mike Kehoe here in Missouri, who's a Republican who I did not vote for, but to give him some credit, he has, to my knowledge, thus far resisted the push from Trump to send Missouri troops, which I'm pleased with, and I hope that continues. But what really bothers, I mean, look, this bothers me for a lot of different reasons. I totally agree that the decision to arm them, to make the pictures even more picture-y, really does risk a Kent state at some point. And I honestly am starting to think that that's what Trump and Hegseth want. Maybe not in D.C., but I think that they eventually want something like that. That may not be their aim right now, but I think that they're that desperate to change the story. When you have, since the moment you came down the elevator, if you're Trump, you've been constantly doing crazier and crazier stuff in order to move the story to where you want it to move to, or distract people from the last thing you did. What happens is you eventually are competing against yourself, and you have to top yourself. And so now, if you're Donald Trump and you finally run into a story that you can't seem to move the American narrative off of, you start doing things like militarizing a city that doesn't appear to have had any emergent need for you to militarize it at all. And then you do things like you say that the Smithsonian has exhibits about slavery that make it seem worse than it was, and therefore, and slavery wasn't really that bad. Right. Because you're having to carve into the bone of controversy because you're now competing against yourself, and it's been 10 years, and you have to get crazier and crazier in order to do that. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that ultimately, no matter how something like a militarization of D.C. might play short-term politically, him going more and more extreme all the time is why the Republicans are going to be in as much trouble as they're going to be in next year in the elections.
All of this is so well taken, including just the unprecedented, indelible pictures. One day, a history will be written, and these phalanx of officers in the nation's capital will be really prominent. I just want to lob in a few legal points. First, remember what we're learning from California, and we already knew in constitutional law. You can't stop people without some individualized suspicion. You can't go up that 14th Street checkpoint, patently unconstitutional. They're just going up to people and saying, stop your vehicle now, and I want to talk to you and ask you things. Patently unconstitutional. So it really is a Fourth Amendment free zone in the whole district. It's unbelievable. Total rampant violations. And I so agree with you, Tara, with a bureau with any integrity First, the agents would be rebelling. What? You want me to walk the streets at midnight? That's not why I became an agent. But everyone would be fired.
To their credit, Harry, I'm sure many are. And that's why they're not out there, because they're like, yeah, no, I didn't become an FBI agent to guard Sephora. Like,
right.
So,
or to harass.
Yeah, to harass people.
And also some of the governors, Vermont has said, I don't see an emergency here. They can actually push back. Legally speaking, so much I want to pick up on Norm's point will depend on the degree to which the court gives some kind of deference for this 100% false, bogus assertion of an emergency, just ignoring what everybody knows, which is that it is a lie. Finally, I just want to pick up on Justice Jackson because she's really been on fire and calling things out. New Republic has an issue coming out, the Heroes of the Resistance, in a week or so. And the first little article there by yours truly is about Justice Jackson. And she's been an unusually, especially for So Junior, strong voice.
Good for her. Somebody needs to.
No
you
shit.
know what I mean? Like somebody
No shit,
needs to, given what's happening at the Supreme Court and just the amount of retribution and violation of so many democratic norms and Donald Trump blurring the lines with the Department of Justice. What happened to John Bolton being, raided by the FBI and Kash Patel. Oh my God. Like, this is crazy.
I do want to say, like yesterday, Chief Justice Roberts disagrees, but he does it in the decorous kind of style of the Supreme Court. So Jackson is really playing a special role. But can we shift gears into the other crazy story of this morning and Bolton, the former national security advisor, having his home in Maryland and his office in D.C. searched? Let me cut to the chase on this. Look, it happens in the country every year or more. Some big shot is getting searched, and you normally think, oh, wow, what did they do? I mean, there's a presumption of regularity. It's gone with this administration, right? There's a lot we don't know, and we're speculating, but it's sure easy to construct scenarios coming from the top. Trump actually talked about this on Fox. I could have done this. That make the whole thing seem completely politicized and weaponized. Not to mention, this whatever they're trying to get at, it has to be based on current and fresh evidence. And Bolton, by all accounts, a very punctilious, careful guy. What do you make about this episode and to what extent it fits in to the broader weaponization agenda that we're seeing from this Department of Justice?
Let me start, Harry. I've known John Bolton for a long time. He was a colleague of mine at the American Enterprise Institute for a long time. I've always thought that John's policies were wacko. We actually had many debates when he came out of law school, and he happened to be a classmate of my wife's at Yale. One of his specialties was campaign finance regulation, and his mentor was wanted to blow the whole thing up. So I debated him a lot over that, and I know him well. And for whatever his views, he is an honest man, and he's a patriot. And it is hard for me to imagine, given what we know, that this is supposedly all about things that have taken place since he left office, because they want to keep within the statute of limitations, where he did not have access to top secret information. And given that there is no presumption of regularity with these people, it just strikes me in a larger context, because what we also know is that Pam Bondi picked the most inappropriate person as a special counsel to investigate a number of people they don't like, including Tish James in New York and Adam Schiff. Of course, under any other regime, the conflict there, since Schiff kept him from becoming U.S. attorney, would be patently obvious. But you have a guy standing outside Tish James's house, making clear that he is going after her, not that he's doing an independent investigation. And some of this based on bogus charges of mortgage fraud, which they're also using at Trump's direction. And Martin saying, and Pulte, the head of the mortgage operation, saying, well, you should resign to show good faith. They're just trying to intimidate and get people out. And we know from what Trump said about John Bolton that this is retribution. It's all part of the larger retribution campaign. The damage they're going to do to law enforcement, to the FBI. And I just want to circle back for a minute to D.C. The D.C. police, who generally have had a pretty good relationship with those of us who live in the city. All of this because they're now under the direction of Trump. They're going to destroy that relationship. The damage that these people, these monsters are doing is not going to go away, even if we are blessed with them leaving after 2 years or 4 years.
You know, it's this pattern that's becoming increasingly scary. You know, you talked about Senator Schiff and Tish James. You've also got the Stacey Abrams focused investigation, which is about nothing, but that was talked about in the State of the Union by Trump to try and make it into something. And now you've got John Bolton and this accusation that he, you know, has classified documents in his house. Look, not only does this make it where you see something like this, to your point, Harry, there's no longer a presumption on the average person's part, if it's a political adversary of Trump, that they actually did anything wrong. I got no love lost for John Bolton after I made a campaign ad that everybody saw. He went on Fox News and accused me of being able to see through a blindfold. Like I don't got any love built in for John Bolton.
Greatest political ad in Senate history, I just got to say.
Well, thank you.
Unbelievable 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. But, you know, I'm scared for the guy because that's the kind of thing that you can quite easily plant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can quite easily have one person show up with a piece of paper in their pocket and just say they found it.
Okay, but I'm the law enforcement guy, and I just want to say I've spent years fielding crazy suppositions like this and saying, you can trust me or not, but this could never, ever happen at the FBI. And that's just not true anymore. It's truly sad. There's nothing beyond the realm of imagination that these monsters, well-chosen word, Norm, wouldn't do. So everything's out the window. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, it's not just harassment. I mean, it's potential financial ruin. When they come after you like this, it could be, it doesn't matter if there isn't a scintilla of evidence. It's a minimum $500,000 bucks, right? In legal fees in a situation like this. And you know, these people don't have that money that they're going after. These aren't, you know, I mean, like, I'm sure they've done well by any standard, but they're not billionaires. You know what I mean? These are not titans of industry. They're people who probably had a good book deal. Like, that's not
Bolton, but Adam Schiff, no. Tish James, no. They're career public servants, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
This is the retribution president. He said he was going to do this. Donald Trump always tells us what he's going to do. I don't know what the hell it's going to take for people to take him seriously. Like this whole thing, this notion from the first time around that, you know, you take him seriously, but not literally, or literally, but not seriously, or whatever that bullshit was. He tells you what he's going to do. He always telegraphs it. And now there are no guardrails. The first term, there were guardrails. This term, there are none inside the administration.
Kash Patel is not a guardrail.
Correct.
Right?
Kash Patel is not a guardrail. Pam Bondi's not a guardrail. Judge Jeanine Pirro is not a guardrail. And at this point, the Supreme Court's not a guardrail. The guardrail should be the Congress and elected officials who at least still have some power to stand up and try to stop things. But we have yet to see that in greater numbers. And the Republicans who think that they are shielded by their loyalty to Donald Trump are sadly mistaken, because he will come for them too. And I just want to know, at what point will enough be enough for these people? I just don't know.
For the Republicans.
For the Republicans that have enabled this and are now full-fledged collaborators on this. What is it going to take? Is it going to be Donald Trump empowering troops, to Jason's point, to have another Kent state, mowing down American citizens, peaceful protesters? Is it going to be, I don't know, a senator's daughter being raped by an impersonator of an ICE agent or something? What's it going to take? Because these selfish bastards are sitting back and saying, well, not our problem. We're going to get our tax cuts or whatever the hell it is that's motivated them to sit back and let Donald Trump do this.
We're scared of being primary. Yeah.
Right? Oh, I might lose my Senate seat. I don't know. But they need to step up because he's going to come for them too. We are marching down to authoritarianism.
But on that point, his thirst for revenge definitely knows no party. Just
Clearly.
This morning, he fired the Defense Intelligence Agency, or he let the DOD do it, Jeffrey Cruz. And we know Bolton, obviously, he served as Trump's NSA chief in the first term. So an enemy is just someone who's crossed him in any fashion whatsoever. One quick legal point is to say, as the law enforcement guy, I don't want to come out and say it's all bogus, because if nothing else, we have the bulwark of the system, a neutral magistrate, supposedly, maybe two here, one in Maryland and D.C., signing off on probable cause that recent evidence, fresh evidence of a crime would be found in these two places. If somehow that's bogus or been worked up, man, the entire system is down the drain. But there could be one, I wanted to get back to Norn's point about embarrassment and money and the like, and Jason's. There's a possibility here that this is the retribution. Mm-hmm. It's the actual embarrassment of the event, and this doesn't develop into a full-fledged case where they could be really embarrassed. So that's what the next week or two is going to be revealed.
Tara, I think to your question about what's it going to take, I think that the silver lining, if there is one here, is that to me, this is an indication that he's aware that his political influence is waning, and he needs to remind people that his actual authority allows him to do this sort of harassment, which will actually work and will make them less likely to stand out. But it is an indicator. When you have to do this kind of thing to remind your people to stay in line, it's because your soft power is decreasing.
Yes.
I would agree with that, but also say that a wounded Trump is even more dangerous, more willing to invoke the Insurrection Act to declare martial law. That's a problem. I would add one other thing here.
Cornered snake sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what we're seeing with ICE is they've got now a huge sum of money thanks to that big, beautiful, horrendous
bullshit
bill.
Yes.
And they are recruiting people with no standards whatsoever, even as they're doing it with the FBI.
Exactly. The FBI, too. Mind-blowing.
They've reduced the standards for the FBI. We're going to see a bunch of thugs coming in who are inappropriate for those positions, joining some who are competent but are happy to do the dirty work, and others who are dragged into it or are going to be fired. At the same time, we can't let this go without noting what Tulsi Gabbard is doing. And I tweeted the other day, Putin is going to give her an even bigger dacha outside of Moscow. She is eviscerating the intelligence apparatus of the United States. And if you look at the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, the voting rights area, the public integrity section, they're losing everybody, bringing in henchmen and women. And how we're going to rebuild these structures. Once people leave, you're not going to get them back. And whether we can get others coming in, if we are able to restore this and get a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress in 2029, you're going to have people saying, yeah, but what about 2032? You know, are we going to come back, rebuild the lives we had, and then be forced out again? So the work that we're going to have to do to recapture the country and our security, and that includes what RFK Jr. is doing to blow up health safety and food safety. You know, this is nihilism. I call it nihilocracy combined with kakistocracy.
Yes, that's very good, Norm. It's perfect.
For everything we're facing now, the long-term damage is indescribably awful.
And that's the best case scenario. It's true that we have this Herculean task of trying to mop out all the crap in the stables because the Republic has survived. But you've drawn points about elections and others that are the most dire break glass possibilities. Now it's time for our sidebar feature. which presents brief accounts of important concepts in the current legal landscape as read by prominent persons from other fields. Today's sidebar topic is the crucial but little understood difference between judicial warrants and administrative warrants. To explain the distinction, I'm really pleased to welcome Lori Moore. Lori Moore, one of the country's greatest living writers, is an author of fiction, criticism, and essays. She's the author of 4 highly acclaimed collections of stories and 4 equally celebrated novels. Moore teaches English and creative writing at Vanderbilt University. In 2006, Moore was elected to the prestigious American Academy of Arts and Letters. And she's received many other awards, including the O. Henry Award, the Rome Prize, the Berlin Prize, and the 2024 National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction. I give you Lori Moore on judicial and administrative warrants.
In several fraught encounters between customs agents and people they are seeking to deport, for example, the episode that resulted in the arrest of Wisconsin Judge Hannah Dugan, people on the scene have confronted agents with the question, do you have a judicial warrant? The question invokes the distinction between judicial warrants and administrative warrants. Customs agents serve both, but more typically, the administrative variety. The legal differences between the two are significant for purposes of understanding the agent's authority to search a prospective deportee or take them into custody. An Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Administrative Warrant, aka Form I-200, issues from an ICE supervisory officer who is an employee of the executive branch. It is based on civil immigration law, not criminal law. An administrative warrant does not give the serving official authority to undertake a search, i.e., to examine a home or another place where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy, unless the person named in the warrant consents. And it permits the official to undertake a civil arrest only if the person named in the warrant is in a public space. The officer uses no force or deception to defeat the deportee's privacy interests, and there is probable cause under civil immigration law. An officer may be able to search and arrest based on additional legal authority, but not on the strength of the warrant. For example, if the officer has probable cause to believe the person is in the U.S. unlawfully and is likely to escape before a judicial warrant can be obtained. Individuals are free to withhold consent to entry when agents present an administrative warrant. Thus, if you are inside a private place, you may ask the agent to slide the warrant under the door or hold it up to a window for review. If it is administrative, common characteristics include a DHS seal, the numbers I-200 or I-205, the signature of an immigration officer or immigration judge, and a statement that the authority comes from immigration law. You needn't consent to entry. It's a good idea to take a picture of the warrant. Individuals also have a constitutional right to remain silent in the face of a service of either sort of warrant. That means they can refuse to answer questions or provide documents and walk away if the agent doesn't have independent constitutional authority to detain them. In contrast, a judicial warrant is an official court order signed by a judge or magistrate that authorizes a search of private property, seizure, or arrest based on probable cause that a crime has been or is being committed. It specifies the address to be searched and the person or things to be seized. If the crime is an immigration offense, the signing judge will be federal. Citizens are required by law to comply with a judicial warrant. If an agent presents either sort of warrant, it's typically a good idea to immediately contact a lawyer or community defense group for assistance when confronted by immigration authorities. For Talking Feds, I'm Lori Moore.
Thank you very much, Lori Moore. You can find Moore's writing in the New York Review of Books, the New Yorker magazine, and many other publications. And she is an ardent supporter of Amnesty International. All right, it is now time for a spirited debate brought to you by our sponsor, Total Wine and More. Each episode, you'll be hearing an expert talk about the pros and cons of a particular issue in the world of wine, spirit, and beverages.
Thanks, Harry. In today's spirited debate, we start with two of our absolute favorite things, dessert and wine, and combine them into one delicious topic. Dessert wines. What are they exactly, and how are they made? Grab a fork and a glass, and let's dig into this sweet subject matter. Dessert wines are just as you'd hope they'd be, sweet wines that are typically served after a meal. Sometimes they're served with a dessert, and sometimes they're served as dessert. And then there are those times in between. The smoothness and lack of acidity make for a pleasant and easygoing taste that pairs perfectly with relaxation. I reach for dessert wines when I'm craving something sweet to enjoy while unwinding in the evening or after a big meal. To make a sweet dessert wine, the fermentation process is halted just prior to the yeast converting all the sugar to alcohol. Interrupting the fermentation ensures that there is sugar remaining in the wine, which gives us that sweetness we crave. But the amount of sweetness varies from wine to wine, and there's no shortage of options. Just pop into Total Wine & More, and you'll see many, many varieties from ports to ice wines to Sauterne and to Hungarian Tokaj. Dessert wines come in both still and sparkling, too. They're also made from both red and white grapes, and they can be served chilled in a small glass or room temperature, proving that really, when it comes to dessert wines, anything goes. Hungry? Thirsty? Maybe a little of both? Stop into your local Total Wine to check out our large selection of dessert wines, and feel free to chat with a helpful guide for a recommendation. Cheers!
Thanks to our friends at Total Wine and More for today's A Spirited Debate. This is a really good segue in a way to gerrymandering the idea of the wounded Trump, because much of that seems to proceed on the premise that the R's know themselves to be in trouble coming at the midterms and are pulling out different stops. But we've seen just at the end of this week, in short order, Texas passes a bill for 5 new Republican seats in Congress. California follows suit, assuming the people endorse it in an election, I think November 4th, which they probably will. Let me pose this in the first instance. Seems to me part and parcel of a new thrust among Democrats, but look, in a perfect good government world, we wouldn't have any of this crap, right? We'd have independent commissions drawing sensible lines and a Supreme Court to police crazy political stuff, et cetera. We have none of that. But what California is doing and the possible race to the bottom we're initiating really is a kind of fire with fire. We've got to do low blows ourselves. What's your reaction to that?
First of all, it's allowable to have midterm redistrictings, which doesn't mean that it is the right or good thing to do. And it's part of what we see.
It's very odd, right?
It's what we see with the utter destruction of norms in the society. And at the same time, we can't let this go, Harry, without mentioning that the Texas Democrats leave the state, go to Illinois, because under the Texas rules, there's no quorum. They stay away for the special session of 30 days, then come back so that Texas can pass this measure. And the Speaker of the House, and this is important simply because the thuggery is not just at the national level. Speaker of the House gets all of the Democrats forces them to try and sign something saying that they will have a 24-hour guard, 24/7, through the remainder of the session. It's illegal.
100%. I recommend Talking Fed Substack on this from yesterday,
yes.
But go ahead. It's so fucking patently unconstitutional.
And it's, this is kidnapping.
False arrest.
And we're going to see if Texas courts, which are as problematic as the Supreme Court, actually take any kind of action, because the Speaker of the House should be imprisoned over this.
Mm-hmm.
And, they humiliated this black woman, and that's not just a descriptor, it is a deliberate thing.
Mm-hmm.
needs permission to go to the bathroom.
Let's just be clear. She didn't want to sign this slip. She has no reason that she has to.
Said
so they
that
said,
it is utterly
with no right,
and
you must stay
wrong
there
for you to do this. And they locked her in the chamber. She went into the bathroom and was doing a podcast. They stormed in and said, you're committing a felony, which is ridiculous. So the humiliation here is a part of it. But having said that, we also have to keep in mind that the only reason Texas did this now, after having already outrageously gerrymandered the districts, was because Trump said, I want those 5 votes. And he's going to other states. And of course, we've had California respond, and we may have other blue states respond as well. But this is not the only way Trump is trying to put his very fat thumb along with his very fat ankle on the scales to try and distort the 2026 elections. It gets back in part to Jason's point. He knows his standing is down. His policies are failing, that we could have another one of those historic midterms, like the 2 that hit Barack Obama in 2010 and 2014, with a huge response against Republicans, including losing the Senate. They've got problems in Iowa. They have potentially a problem in Nebraska. They have seats that they ought to be able to hold on to that are questionable right now. It's still an uphill battle, the Senate. The House, I think, would be a goner for them under almost any circumstances. And they're trying to keep that from happening. And remember, the Justice Department normally is out there to make sure that elections are done on the straight and narrow. This Justice Department is going to do what it can. And the FBI and ICE, you can bet anything that we're going to have ICE agents outside lines waiting to vote of Hispanic voters just to intimidate citizens. They'll pull a few people out of the line. They don't care if they're citizens. They'll beat them up and throw them in one of their facilities and then let them go a few days later. But they're going to do what they can to suppress votes. And we need all hands on deck to try and block all of these things from happening.
That's why what Gavin Newsom is doing is resonating with so many people. You know, many of us have had issue with him, or especially earlier this year when he was platforming some of the more right-wing extremists. And we're like, what are you doing? He's recalibrated. And since Donald Trump tried to militarize LA and go after him and threaten to arrest him as the governor of California, based on what? I don't know. Just intimidation tactic again. He said, I dare you. Come and get me then. Donald Trump did not. But Gavin Newsom and what he's doing now with mocking, the relentless mocking of Donald Trump on social media is absolutely brilliant. And the people who don't get it just don't get it. He's literally holding up a mirror to all of MAGA, to the right-wing media, to Donald Trump himself, showing everyone how absolutely batshit crazy and ridiculous Donald Trump's behavior is. And yet they criticize Gavin Newsom. Like, if you listen to Fox News going on and on about, oh my gosh, he's the governor of California. He should be more dignified. Doesn't he have anything else better to do? This is outrageous. I'm sorry. Do you see who's in the White House and who you support every day on your channel? Like, it's unbelievable, the lack of self-awareness. But he's doing this to fight fire with fire. He's using that expression, and he's 100% right. And the difference here is that, to Norm's point, is mid-decade redistricting allowed? Yes, but under very, very special circumstances, and this isn't one of them. But just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. But Gavin Newsom is saying, okay, well, we can use our process as well to do this and take it to the people of California. He's democratically doing this and putting it on the ballot. And if Californians reject it, so be it. But at least it's up to them. And he's giving them the option. He's presenting it to them, explaining why it's necessary. He doesn't want to do it. He shouldn't have to do it. But damn it, if this is what the game they're going to play, we're not going to sit passively by and let them get away with it. So here you go. We're going to do it too.
And by the way, they are going to pass it.
I hope so. You're out there in California. I hope so. And they need to. And I'm an institutionalist. I don't like these processed arguments and manipulations. It's killing me to even say this. But unfortunately, there is no limit to what the Republicans will do to try to cheat and rig the election, because they know that they are losing with the American people because of what Donald Trump is doing, because of the big, beautiful bullshit bill is not beautiful for anyone who isn't a rich billionaire guy. And they are unpopular. The Epstein files and showing the hypocrisy on that is not good for Donald Trump. It's depressing his base. So they're doing everything they can, using our open, free, and fair elections and the process to manipulate and rig and cheat, because that's what Donald Trump does.
And Jason, I want to bring this to you because you're the one who's been most in the political fray. It's totally true. Newsom seems to have caught fire somewhat with this fighting fire with fire, after sort of they go low, we go high.
That's out the window now, unfortunately.
Credo of Democrats for a long time, because they have been taking outrageous kind of slings and arrows from Trump and everyone for years. I'll add to this Pritzker, who the Illinois governor, who I think his national profile is really growing. And, he's compared Trump with Hitler now, called Abbott a cheater, called the members of the Senate and Congress bootlickers. Here's my basic question to serve up to you first. Has the overall composition and chemistry of both 26 and 28 changed? And it's now kind of a certainty that whoever emerges as the standard bearer for the Democrats will have endorsed this fire for fire, take it to them, more pugilistic approach? Or is that the actual cultural thing that is still up for grabs within the party?
I don't think it's a certainty that they will have endorsed it, because I think that there are a lot of different ways to do this. I think that what J.B. Pritzker and what Gavin Newsom are doing politically right now are extremely effective ways to position yourself in a Democratic primary in 28 in the lane of current elected official or well-known politician. It's a couple of, real serious delineations, right? I mean, it's a big lane, but it's also, ultimately, if you had to ask me right now, like what the most likely profile, or I would say most likely tone of somebody who actually ends up getting the nomination for president and having a real chance to win for the Democrats in 28, I would say it's probably a person who runs not just against the Republican establishment, but also against the Democratic one in a genuine and authentic way. And that's probably going to look pretty populist. That might be Gavin Newsom, it might be J.B. Pritzker, but in order to do it, they're going to have to overcome the fact that they are currently part of that Democratic establishment. And that's okay. It doesn't mean it can't be a governor or a senator or a member of Congress. I have some favorites that fit those, but it doesn't preclude that. What I do think, to go back to gerrymandering for just a moment, I think that for anybody listening to this, if you have a friend who this topic comes up with, or just the topic of what's the real difference between Democrats these days and Republicans, I would compare Texas and California's approaches right here. Texas already has, as Norm pointed out, a very gerrymandered map that takes a state that is a much closer state in statewide elections than is its congressional delegation. It already is there. It's already gerrymandered. And then they're trying to max out that gerrymander because the president asked them to. California is a state that is actually, as we sit here, the national model, in my opinion, for how to go about drawing districts and holding sort of all-in primaries instead of partisan primaries in a way where you actually are going about it in a way where you're trying to get the best federal representation that actually represents the state. They already have the independent process that is sort of the utopian dream of those of us who believe in democracy. And in order to respond to Texas, they are willing to respond to it in a way that doesn't one-up it, doesn't create an arms race, does, as both of you pointed out, actually goes to the people to get an endorsement from the people, but they're willing to set aside that process that is actually quite a just one to have a proportional response that increases the amount of Democratic representatives they turn out equal to the violation by Texas, with the stated purpose of eventually going back to the system that is more fair to both sides. Whether that actually happens with partisan inertia, we will know, and I think we'll find out it won't, sadly. But to me, that's the fundamental difference, is which side is team democracy and which side is team authoritarian, is that one already was abusing power and was like, let's abuse it more. The other had gone out of its way not to abuse power and is like, okay, we'll do it, but only to correct the bad thing that you did. And we won't go a step further. And that is a really important distinction between the two.
That's a good point.
Let me make a couple of points here. The first is, One of our adversaries is the press corps that treats them both the same.
Yeah.
As they have done with everything else. It's the false equivalence again.
100%.
They're treating what California is doing as on a par with what Texas is doing. And that makes our task more difficult. The second point is that the zeitgeist, as Jason said, is very important. The Democratic Party's in the dumper right now with its own base. And there's a reason why Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker are on the rise. Because unlike the congressional Democrats, and here I single out the Senate Democrats in particular, because the House ones don't have so much power, there's a reason why Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not doing well. And these guys are, because they're fighting to a base that sees the damage and the danger that we have out there. Now, along with Tara, I've had misgivings about Gavin Newsom for other reasons, too. I question anybody's judgment who would marry Kimberly Guilfoyle. Even if she were different back then.
She certainly looked different back then.
He also almost embodies, if you said to Central Casting, bring me a politician who looks like a president, but a politician. He is a quintessential politician, and I don't know how well that will play over the long run.
It's like the Mitt Romney effect on the Democratic side,
Yeah. I think Pritzker is in a stronger position because he doesn't look like a politician, and he doesn't act so much that way. He's more plain spoken, and he has another advantage, which is he can say, I'm a billionaire. Yes. I'm a businessman. Yes. But I've actually run a state and I know how politics works, unlike these other billionaires or these business people. And that may help. But I don't discount the possibility that Jason raised that, assuming we have elections going forward and have one in 2028, of somebody emerging from outside the system, which makes me uneasy. Because every time I've seen one of these figures who comes from outside, who thinks that they know what they're doing, they don't understand it, and it's not clear to me that they will necessarily bring the right people around them. But we're far removed from that right now. The main lesson is, and a lesson that Senate Democrats especially have to learn, is you have to fight back. My slogan is WWMD. What would Mitch do?
Yep.
Look what Mitch McConnell did. And the fact that they got taken over and over in the last appropriations and budget cycle and folded when they had no input does not bode well. If they don't stand up to Trump and the Senate Republicans, all of whom are basically lickspittles to Trump, whatever the reason is, we don't have any guardrails in place except for some courageous judges and some good lawyers who are bringing cases. We need Congress because we don't have the Supreme Court and we don't have an independent Congress. We need Democrats in Congress to take the message that Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker are bringing to the table.
Real quick, I just want to clarify, because Norm, I agree with you that there are risks to somebody outside the system. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that I think this person will come from outside of the system. I actually think it's more likely they come from within it. But I think that the winner will be the person who adequately campaigns against it. And I mean,
positions themselves.
Yeah,
right. Anti-establishment probably is more.
Right. On both sides. I think it's going to have to be somebody who will only have credibility with both independents and, frankly, Democrats by calling out both sides. That could be a Ruben Gallego. It could be, frankly, if Bernie were 15 years younger, he would be a shoo-in for this. And you don't have to come at it from the far left to do this. But it's just a matter of saying, like, look, this is wrong. It hasn't worked. We've talked about it this way. It doesn't make any sense. I think that's ultimately how you win this time around.
We need somebody from the heartland, somebody who was a veteran, somebody who's held a statewide office before. I've got just the guy. He's standing right there in front of us.
There you have it. I just want to say I had a long interview with Pritzker this week, and he was very critical of the Democratic establishment overall and pretty plain-spoken, a fire-to-fire guy. Anyway, if you want to hear where he's coming from, the YouTube Talking Feds channel has a solid 45 minutes with him from a couple days ago. Last word to one who knows Republicans maybe better than all of us, having once been one.
Yes, as someone who spent 27 years on the other side, I can say I wholly agree and concur with the fact that Democrats have been outsmarted and outmaneuvered by Republicans for decades. And the lack of imagination on the part of Democrats has been an unbelievable albatross, and that they've got to cut that and stop being so cautious. The reason why the Seneca Project produces the type of ads and content that we do is because we do not ask permission. We do not worry about what the establishment wants. Michelle Kinney and I, my co-founder, we come from blue-collar roots. We are real people, and we present our content and our ads in plain language without worrying about who we're offending. It's real, everyday stuff. And the more that Democrats do that, the more they will resonate, which is why what Gavin Newsom is doing by throwing everything, caution to the wind, and doing it differently has made so many people take a breath of fresh air and go, oh my God, this is great. Keep it up. Because that's what you need. You need people who are fighters that are willing to throw out the playbook and talk to people like normal human beings, recognize where they've been at fault. Do not be afraid to say, you know what, that didn't work before. We're going to try this over here. And that's why the midterm elections are so important. That's why the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey are so important, because the states and localities are the first line of defense against pushing back with what Donald Trump is trying to do at the federal level. Would you prefer to have a Gavin Newsom type of person as your governor? Or do you want someone who's going to be a bootlicker for Donald Trump that's going to let militarized troops come into your state and take over? That's the choice. And that's why midterms are so important. Elections have consequences.
There you go. And it's such an interesting quality, the straight talking and seeming not to be a politician. It's challenging and, but you can really smell it. Anyway, man, oh man, so much more to come. We're out of time for now, except for our last feature of 5 words or fewer. And speaking of a deep breath outside, Tara, we go to Donald Trump's statement. I'm just going to quote it. I know more about grass than any human being, I think, anywhere in the world. So our 5 words or fewer is, what else does Donald Trump know more about than anyone in the world?
Bronzer.
I'm going to go back to his statement, and my 5 words are, Willie Nelson begs to differ.
That's good. Yeah.
Excellent. Double entendre there from the savvy Mr. Ornstein. Okay.
All right. I love a good alliteration. So teeny tiny hands and toadstools.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going with, especially given the search of John Bolton's premises today, document folding, hiding, and storage. Thank you so much to Jason, Norm, and Tara. And thank you very much, listeners, for tuning in to Talking Feds. If you like what you've heard, please tell a friend to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever they get their podcasts. And please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we are posting full episodes and my daily takes on top legal stories. Check us out as well on Substack at harrylitman.substack.com, where I'll be posting 2 or 3 bulletins a week, breaking down the various threats to constitutional norms and the rule of law. And Talking Feds has joined forces with The Contrarian. I'm a founding contributor to this bold new media venture, committed to reviving the diversity of opinion that feels increasingly rare in today's news landscape, where legacy media seems to be tacking toward Trump for business reasons rather than editorial ones. Rest assured, we're still the same scrappy, independent podcast you've come to know and trust, just now linked up with an ambitious project designed for this pivotal moment in our nation's legal and political discourse. Find out more at contrarian.substack.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't worry, as long as you need answers, the Feds will keep talking. Talking Feds is produced by Luke Cregan and Katie Upshaw. Associate producer, Becca Havian. Sound engineering by Matt McGardle. Rosie Dawn Griffin, David Lieberman, Hamza Mahadrenathan, Emma Maynard, and Hallie Necker are our contributing writers, and production assistance by Akshaj Turbailu and Sebastian Navarro. Thanks very much to Lori Moore for explaining the critical difference between judicial and administrative warrants. Our music, as ever, is by the amazing Philip Glass. Talking Feds is a production of Delito LLC. I'm Harry Littman. Talk to you later.